What is up YouTube, and welcome to this The Witches breakdown and spoiler review. So this is an adaptation of the acclaimed Roald Dahl book, and I must say I was never really big into the Roald Dahl books as a child, maybe except Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I was much more into Harry Potter and Anthony Horowitz books. However, here we have a Robert Zemeckis take on the novel, which was originally adapted for the silver screen in 1990, and we also have a screenplay co-written by Guillermo del Toro, and I have to wonder, what would his movie have been like if he was directing this? And I would love to see him have another Hellboy. We start the movie with a voiceover by Chris Rock explaining what witches are and how they despise children. This person narrating the movie, we would later learn, is the main character, and his parents died in a car crash as they were not wearing seatbelts. It was around Christmas time that his parents sadly died, and he's then taken home by his grandmother as he is shy and withdrawn. And I have to say, while I didn't really enjoy this movie as a whole, Octavia Spencer was really great in this grandmother acting role, and she tries to get him to come out of his shell, even trying to dance, which is one of the most joy-filled scenes, I think, in the movie. Now, he doesn't eat or actually do anything else until one day his mother comes home with a pet white mouse that he decides to call Daisy. However, they also start to be watched by a witch, as she seems to have cursed the grandmother and she starts coughing. Now, one day at the store, a witch offers the child some sweets and she has a snake, but he declines and tells his grandmother. This is similar to the original movie where a witch offered to show him her snake when he was in a treehouse. She tells him how she knew a witch long ago when she was younger. She was carrying water with another girl, only for the other girl to get caught by a witch who offered her candy, and she slowly turned into a chicken and was kept in a coop, which I actually found utterly harrowing and reminds me of this creepy Goosebumps story where a kid was turned into a bee. The grandmother plans to take them to a hotel where the witches would never actually get to him, because the witches only go after poor children and kids who would never be missed or had a fuss made about them if they were to go missing. And they go to a fancy hotel to the Gulf of Mexico, which loads of white people are there, and well, yes, there's a subtext there I shan't be going into. Each country has a witch's coven, and there is also a Grand High Witch, here played by Anne Hathaway, and more on her later. The grandmother and kid get their room, which is 7676. It means they're in for a bad time and they will be heavily tested, or at least that's what the grandmother got out of the number. And the grandmother is known as a healer in the community and seems to know a lot about magic and potions. I'd imagine she'd learnt a lot about that in response to her childhood. The anti-children's cruelty charity arrive and they're having a conference at the hotel, but this is actually a cover for the Coven of Witches to meet, along with the Grand High Witch. She is obsessed with turning brats into rats, or at least that's what I got from Anne Hathaway's ridiculous accent throughout the entire movie. And she also asks the hotel's manager, Stanley Tucci, what would happen if mice were to be found, and the hotel manager says of course he would call the exterminator, a hint to her later plan to turn every child in the world into mice. Now, the child is then told that you can tell a witch easily as they have claws. That's why they always wear gloves. They're bald and have wig rashes and have no toes, along with a weird, scary Glasgow Kiss style smile. The next day he is told to go out and play, but ends up going to the conference room where the Anti-Children's League would later meet. But he meets a child that he met earlier who is always eating sweets or crisps and is constantly chastised by his mother or his father. It turns out that he was here to meet a woman who would give him 6 bars of Swiss chocolate, which of course she is a witch, and we would later learn that that is the Grand High Witch herself. He walks off with his family, and the grandson here, he plans to train his mouse, which is what he was doing later. which is what he was doing earlier in the movie in the conference hall. But suddenly the witches come in and they reveal to him while he's hiding that they are indeed witches. Now, Anne Hathaway here in this scene specifically is so ridiculously over the top. I had not only a hard time understanding what her accent or where it's supposed to come from, but I couldn't understand half of what she was saying, and the overacting here is just absolutely ridiculous, turning it into a total farce. Now, she plans to use a potion to infect sweets in every sweet shop in the world, so every child will slowly turn into a mouse. The kid turns up to get his chocolate this time and is turned into a mouse, but is saved by the white mouse that the child, the protagonist, had and called Daisy. But it turns out this mouse was actually a person all this time. She was turned into a mouse 4 months ago, and it's always a joy to have Kristen Chenoweth in a movie or a show, and she didn't say anything earlier because she was scared of someone finding out, or at least someone killing her, thinking that it was an absolute curse or something like that. And it turns out she was sold by a vagrant to a pet shop. They run around the hotel and eventually escape the exterminators, and they get to the grandmother's room and reveal themselves to the grandmother, and they tell her about the whole thing while the protagonist is also a mouse. They plan to use the potion to put it into the food of the witches, getting rid of them forever. The movie here absolutely falls apart and just feels like kind of a nothingy movie, if that makes sense. Now, in the original, all the witches were turned into mice, including the Grand High Witch, when the soup is tainted with a potion. However, here, the Grand High Witch recognises the grandmother and doesn't eat the soup, as her coven are turned into mice. We have a new few scenes which we didn't have in the original, where the grandmother and the kids now use mouse traps and things like that to yeet the potion into the gullet of the witch, and she turns into a roid rage version of a mouse and chases them, only to be trapped and presumably eaten by her own familiar, the cat. The kids find a chest full of money that would have been used for the plans to infect candy shops, and also a book of names of every witch in the world. And this is different from the original, where it had names of witches in America, whereas the 1990 version was set in England, laying seeds for a sequel there. But in the 1990 version, the kids are also turned into humans and get to live out the rest of their lives. But the kids here stay as mice and seem happy about that, just like the original book, and Roald Dahl was angry that he saw this change from the book in 1990, and later they go around training kids to kill witches around the globe. Overall, I felt it was a very weak movie. That might just be me not being a fan of the original text, but, well, it just felt nothing. I felt nothing from this movie. Despite Octavia Spencer being a joy, the kids had pretty much nothing, and it just felt formulaic from going from point to point and adding nothing, and just felt a bit vapid and forgettable. No wonder it ended up on HBO Max. But that's it for this video. Please do drop a like down below. Please do subscribe with notifications on, and I'll see you soon, and goodbye.